I'm Landon Wilkie. I'm museum curator at Historic Wendover Airfield here in Wendover, Utah. Now, I'm not a movie buff by any means, but even when I'm sitting in an audience, I think there's something to be said about the authenticity of shooting on location. And Wendover is one of those cool spots where you have these vast expanses of the salt flats that give you really great shots. There's some pretty stark mountain ranges directly north and to the west that you can see in the background of some of these pictures. And then here at the airport itself, that skyline of original buildings, which are clearly an airport and give you that feel, I think that stands out when you are producing a film. I think most people, when they hear Wendover, the natural and only thought is, oh, the casinos. But having been able to live here, especially for a certain amount of time, you can see the beauty past the strip of this West Desert region, getting to explore the salt flats, hike the mountains. And for myself personally, I've always been invested in aviation history, and this is such an amazing place to be. This is the most original and complete Army Air Force training base remaining in the country. There's about 90 period buildings still standing of almost 700 that were here that represent what the day in the life was like for these folks gearing up for war. So there's been a wide number of films, short films, TV series, even documentaries that have featured Wendover and Wendover Airport specifically. So it's been really interesting to see. All the way back in the 70s, we had Birds of Prey. There was the Philadelphia Experiment, big ones you've heard of like Con Air, Independence Day. There's a unique one in 1992 called Wind. And then as recently as 2023, we had one called Devil's Men filmed out here using some of these period buildings. So a wide range, but one of the most notable TV series to be filmed out here was Fallout, that debuted earlier this year in 2024. Yeah, this site's been chosen often for the period buildings. We have about 90 original World War II buildings still standing. Some of those are in a state of decay, which works out well for things like Fallout, where they're depicting a nuclear apocalypse. It was almost disheartening to see how little they had to change for it to fit their theme there. But then some of the biggest changes, like in 1984, the Philadelphia Experiment, the city of Wendover actually sold off several of our World War II era buildings, and those were burned down for the film. So those have left large footprints where we wish there were still buildings. And then for something like Con Air, they constructed a mock control tower on the south base that served as Lerner Airfield. The top of it was blown to bits in the movie, which is great to see, but then the remnants are still standing, including you can go all the way up to that top platform and get a great view of the airfield. And that was featured even in Fallout more recently. But even just a few years later, when they filmed Independence Day here, Wendover was Area 51. You get to see inside of that hangar. There were some cosmetic changes trying to make it look a little more like an active airfield, because that was a rough wooden hangar. But even that office space they used for that film, and you'll see it featured as the entrance to the underground bunkers where the aliens are kept. As far as the films interacting with the history, outside of, say, the documentaries, there's very little that's direct. Well, as someone who knows the history, or if any of the audience might know the history, there's some really cool connections. Like here we trained the Atomic Mission Unit, which would be called the 509th Composite Group. This is where they learned how to drop the Little Boy and Fat Man atomic bombs, and we were a Manhattan Project site for other things going on. As far as our direct connection, kind of changing perspectives on the use of nuclear technology and especially nuclear weapons, there does seem to be a ever-changing trend. Always, this has been a pretty controversial decision of the use of the atomic bombs in World War II. And as far as telling the stories of the men who did it, they're trying to communicate the work that these guys did. They were historical actors who we have to try to understand. There was not a single person unaffected by World War II here in the States. Everyone lost a loved one directly or indirectly. Everyone's life was changed due to rationing and all these other sacrifices that had to be made by every citizen and every soldier, every service member. as they went through these very difficult years. So that has to be remembered as to why here these guys are given the opportunity to, they didn't know the big picture, but they have the opportunity to work with this potentially war-ending weapon as they've been told. They were giving these orders, and here they are following through, doing their job because they want to see this war brought to an end. And that is what happened. Now, on that point, nuclear weapons, atomic weapons, are an absolutely devastating thing. We've seen the aftermath on the ground at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They did what we intended to do as far as getting the Japanese to surrender and bringing that global war to an end, which was important. But I think the use of those weapons at that point has prevented us from using them now. But then as we continue through media, on the complete other end of the spectrum, like Fallout, which paints that picture of the devastation that nuclear weapons could bring, I think that highly depicts how most people understandably feel about even the existence of these weapons in the world and just the devastation that could be wrought. So I think it's important to have those perspectives. And as we say for the museum, Historic Wendover Airfield, we walk where they walked. And that's something unique to this area with all that's left.